Good afternoon and welcome to the session, The Myth of Multitasking Working Parents. My name is Oriana Abella and I will be moderating the session. I am a partner at Thornton and principally head the capital markets division within the firm. However, I am also a working parent and have 3 boys aged 1, 2 and 5. With me today there is Stefania Dumaxant on behalf of Richmond Foundation. There is also Gloria Axisa on behalf of MAPS, Pauline Micheli on behalf of the Commissioner for Children, and also Marco Bonnici on behalf of the Malta Union of Teachers. Perhaps we can start with each panelist so that they can give a brief introduction about themselves. So can we please first start with Stefania?
Hi, good morning, Oriana and all the people who are following us. Thank you for the invitation to this webinar. It's a very important topic. I myself come from the mental health sector. I'm a social worker by profession, and I am the CEO of Richmond Foundation. So I am an employer, and I'm also a mother of a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old. So I'm very interested in the discussion that will be happening today.
Gloria, please.
Good morning, I'm Gloria Axisa. Thanks for this invitation and for giving a voice to the parents. I'm a mother of a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old, but I'm also an educator. And I truly believe that for the well-being of the child, there should be a good relationship between schools and homes. But homes include also the conditions of the working parents. So this will be my point of departure for this discussion. Thank you.
Pauline?
So I am Pauline Micheli, the Commissioner for Children, and my background is education mainly and also broadcaster. But when I say broadcaster, it was mainly focused, because I'm no longer a broadcaster now, on education with a particular audience. I had general population, women as audience, and also schools, because at one time, for a number of years, I was also involved in schools broadcasting. But the majority of years, I spent them in schools. I finished my career in education as the head of Giovanni Cormi Higher Secondary. So that is my background. Now, as in my office of Commissioner for Children, I've been in office for about 5 years now, and our main, we're here constituted by law. There's a law which is based on the UNCRC, United Nations Convention for the Rights of the Child, and we, of course, our main task is awareness raising on children's rights. We visit schools, we target parents, because we believe that parents are very, very important to safeguard children's rights and also to push for them. And so those are the main aspects. But with awareness raising, there's one important issue and one important principle which we're now working on more strongly, because the main pillars of the convention are provision, protection for children, and also participation of children in all decisions that affect them. And the last principle is lagging behind, and so we are now focusing more on how to have children participate more in all decisions that affect them. So I will be speaking here both as a parent and a grandmother myself, and I had also first-hand experience now with COVID, with my grandchildren, and also as the Commissioner for Children, pushing for children's rights.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether Marco is with us. Perhaps Marco, can you give an introduction if you are online? Perhaps then when Marco joins, we can then provide an introduction at that point in time. So starting the seminar, recently I have read an article from the New York Times which stated that in the COVID-19 economy, you can have a kid or a job, but you cannot have both. Obviously, during COVID, all employees which were previously never allowed to work from home were actually given the facility to work from home for the first time probably in their lives. However, now adults, the ones that is obviously that have held on to their jobs, because as we all know, some jobs have actually been furloughed, are expected to go now back to work as the economy reopens. So looking back now, what have we really learned from COVID? During the seminar, we will be discussing the topic from the angle obviously of working parents. However, we also will be discussing other aspects such as the flexibility of work, whether that actually helps employees and whether it should remain going forward, the support given to working parents, and also the psychological aspect, both of the working parents and also from the aspect of children. So around a month ago, our offices of Grant Thornton undertook a survey to assess the impact of COVID. We found that various industries, particularly obviously those which are more office-based, such as professional services and financial services, perform their roles very well when performing the work at home. In fact, our surveys found that 71% of Maltese employees stated that they were much more productive teleworking as opposed to working from an office. However, from an employer's point of view, the survey stated that only 29% of employers in fact agreed that employees were more productive. So now going on to our panel, does this statement really hold for working parents, particularly those with young children? The reason is that the survey in our case illustrated that 8% of the participants do not have children. So the 71% of Maltese employees who stated that they were more productive during teleworking, during the COVID pandemic, does this apply to working parents, especially those with young children? Are there jobs now which are more family friendly? And also going forward, once that COVID is over, will everyone just return to their normal mindset, or will employers actually change their mindset and continue to offer flexibility? If I just were to share this graph prior to opening the discussion to the panel. It shows that from our survey, in fact, nearly 50% of correspondents prefer that going forward, as much as 3 days a week will be still performed from from home, rather than from an office. So if I can open the discussion to the panel, perhaps Stefania can address this aspect first.
Thank you, Oriana. It has definitely been an interesting ride with COVID and working parents. Richmond also carried out a survey to assess the impact of COVID on the nation's mental health. And out of 1,060 respondents, 4% reported that their biggest challenge and their biggest concern was actually working at home with having children around. Homeschooling further added to this challenge. We are also currently analyzing a second wave of the survey, and interestingly enough, 22% of respondents between the age bracket 35 to 44 reported that their biggest challenge was making alternative arrangements for the care of their children. So there we see that it is also very age specific. That was an increase in that age bracket of 4 percentage points. So the people who thought it was going to be a challenge were actually less than those who found it a challenge. Yes, going forward, a lot of people would like to continue to working from home, but if I go by the feedback that I have received, even as an employer and having my own experience as a mother, most of us are positive enough to assume that there would be arrangements in place for the children. So some summer schools are opening up, and most people are hoping maybe too optimistically, but we'll get to see that later, are hoping that the schools will have some sort of return to normality. Because yes, definitely it is a major challenge to work while having children at home, especially the younger children. I mean, those of us who have older kids know that they can see to their own entertainment, maybe prepare a snack if there is anything that they need. The younger children are much more dependent, and that puts a greater burden on the parents, especially those parents who have jobs which are very time-bound. If there is flexibility, if I have work to do, which I can do at any time in the day, so long as it's done, that's fine. I've spoken to people who wake up early, do the bulk of the work before the children wake up, then stop and work when the children fall asleep, or maybe coordinate with another adult, with the other parent, to sort of slot in children's time and space. But if you are working in an environment where your employer or the role itself demands that you are online from 8 till 5, having children, especially young ones, who will not understand that you are not available and who have needs that have to be seen to, is, well, practically impossible. And it impacts on the guilt feeling of the parents in so many aspects. Screen time is a topic which comes up in conversations around this time. So COVID has presented us with a very new situation, very abruptly. And it's great that we are looking into it, because we really need to develop new and corresponding ways of how we will balance our work and our families.
Thank you very much for that, Stefania. I have noticed that also Marco now has joined, and perhaps now you can also provide us with an introduction, Marco, and perhaps also you can bridge this point which Stefania has just raised, that not everyone is in fact has the flexibility to work from home, or even flexible hours for that from that point of view. In fact, we do know that there are, for example, all the frontliners who actually have to perform their work on premises. There are shop assistants who have to perform their work on premises, and also the individuals who have to work on a shift basis. So perhaps you can also provide us with your point of view of the flexibility, both from working at home and those which do not have that flexibility, and whether there are sufficient arrangements in place for those working parents. For example, whether the childcare, the breakfast club, or club 3 to 16 are sufficient measures to mitigate these aspects of working parents.
Okay, yes, thanks, Oriana. Good afternoon to all. Basically, just an introduction about myself, and then I pass to your questions. I am the president of the Malta Union of Teachers. Basically, I've been in this role for the past 3 years. I have just been re-elected in the post for the next 4 years. I'm involved obviously in all areas of education and in the sector, but I am also, on the other hand, the president of Forum, which is a confederation of trade unions. So basically, my perspective is in education, but it is a bit wider as well due to the umbrella organization which are there as well. Basically, with regards to this topic, I have to make a clear assertion initially. So even if we say that telework is good, is positive, is beneficial for the employee, it is beneficial perhaps even for the employer, for the aspect of flexibility. We had teleworking or flexible working arrangements concurrently with schools being closed. And this is an aspect which needs to be considered, because the main telework the meaning of telework is not to have working parents also giving tuition to their children at home. So that's double the amount of work that they have. So telework with schools being open is one thing, and I believe that telework is truly beneficial in that sense, even in having flexible working arrangement and other measures. But then to expect teleworking why there are children at home and you have to obviously follow their studies while doing them online. It's another story, and obviously it's another scenario. So from the aspect of employment, which is obviously my area, it's good to provide the best working environment and flexible working experiences to employees. Obviously, it has to benefit both the organization and both the employee. So that is, it has to be clear. And to the same effect, there are obviously some professions and some jobs who cannot telework, or there are certain limitations regarding teleworking, and this is true and it's a fact. But then, for example, for most office employees who can obviously just carry their laptop and work from home, but just by having an internet connection, it can be done, and it can be a solution. I still don't believe that 100% telework may be a solution still. I believe that the physical contact, having meetings, just interacting with people without the use of devices is beneficial both socially and even psychologically. And so I think that telework is good, and trying to find the best balance is good as well, but not shifting entirely to some form of remote working as well. With regards to education, which is obviously my area, we have had an experience obviously of online teaching throughout the past weeks, mainly as you know, we had the period before Easter where we were testing the ground, we were testing what works and what works, and for consolidating teaching and learning. This was a learning for all of us. It was a learning curve for teachers, for educators. It was a learning curve for us as well, even policy makers and trade unions. But I believe that this experience will help us. Will help us eventually if we need to go again into the same scenario of having to work remotely or having to teach remotely. Because as you know, at this stage we have Scholaside, which is open. We have the clubs which are open. With the obviously restrictions which are in place. We are planning to open the scholastic year in the best normal way possible in September, but then we do not know whether in September or at a later date we'll have to actually close schools again due to the rise again of the pandemic. So that is a scenario, but we are preparing well for that. This morning we had another meeting of the task force. I believe that you are aware that there is currently a task force. It has been working for months now, and it is addressing all aspects of teaching and learning with regards to the closure of schools. And this morning we had another meeting where we are discussing the measures which need to be taken once we open the schools during the scholastic year. And we are preparing for that. So at least that is the positive aspect of it. The negative aspect of this is the unknown. We still have too many unknowns, even with regards to the next scholastic year. We know that we are doing efforts to open schools, but not how and when. Obviously, we may need to close them again.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that addresses a lot of concerns that working parents have at the moment, especially whether schools will reopen in September, October, or whether they will remain closed, because as you rightly pointed out, working from home with children around you is not the same as just teleworking in its normal sense. Perhaps, Pauline, if you have any other further comments on this flexibility issue, whether it should remain in place or whether the normal working hours of individuals should remain as they were pre-COVID, and also perhaps whether you can give us also your point of views on the challenges being faced by parents on an ongoing basis, because as we all know that another concern faced by working parents is that school activities and school meetings are all held during the morning, whilst, as Marco said, that some employees can just take their laptop and work from home. Not all others have this flexibility in their working arrangements. So over to you, Pauline.
So maybe first of all, I should say something about the impact of COVID on children. A policy brief issued in April by the UN stated clearly that although the pandemic children were largely spared from health issues, from physical health. They were almost not affected at all, but their mental and social well-being has been affected, and we'll see the effects of COVID and the isolation and the fact that they were away from school, the school environment, away from the peers, away from their teachers, and they will be suffering. It will come out later on. So that is, I think, a point which we should remember. And it's interesting to note that Finland, one of the countries which had very few deaths, the pandemic was very well tackled there, at no point closed its schools. It adjusted, made schooling a bit more flexible. Some countries decreased the number of hours, and also they adjusted and were more flexible in the activities. But Finland strongly, and the Commissioner for Children there strongly pointed out that no data, there's no research available on the effects of COVID on the opening or closing of schools, and they object to the closing of schools completely, and because there's no proof that children are exposing the families, they're being exposed more, and they're carrying the virus more than it won't affect the pandemic, the results of the pandemic. So there, some countries have closed schools altogether, like we did, but I think the way forward to that is we really can't close the schools, because the effects on children and the parents, especially when the parents are working and they're teleworking, we've all mentioned the stress, the anxiety on the family situations, and the children are also suffering. They're suffering anxiety, they're suffering isolation, they're suffering from pressure, school pressure, especially those who are who had exams coming up, final exams, and also the youngest, the primary school children, suffered more because the attention span of young children is very, very limited, and also because not all children were given their lessons. And to have children, to give them their lessons, the parent has to be attending with them, and has to. So how can you manage work and attention? And if you tell me that they rise up in the morning to start work, to finish, to do or start your, go through your emails and do other stuff, work stuff, and then continue and take care of the children, do homeschooling with them, and then later on moonlight to finish with your work, I don't call that a very family-friendly situation, and of course it won't work out in the long term. So families have to be supported, children have to be supported, and we have to remember those children who are more vulnerable than others, those who have a disability, those who usually have an LSC and they weren't given the support they needed during COVID. Also those who are experiencing poverty, various types of poverty, digital poverty, digital divide becomes very much pronounced when these situations arise, when everything is done online, and also physical. In situations where the family atmosphere is a bit abusive or abusive and violent, then all the members of the family are affected, and children, of course, suffer a great deal. So working from home all the week round with the children around, it's not good for anyone. So we have to find a good balance between flexibility, we have to take into consideration the well-being of children, and also the well-being of the family in general, the well-being of parents themselves and the teachers, because teachers also having to prepare and talk to children online. Sometimes they had to record lessons, so there's no direct communication with children. That didn't help the teachers themselves, because they feel they're talking to themselves. They can't interact so much with children, and also children themselves. So the way forward can be a bit different. We can have go over the syllabi, the curricula, revise them, make them more up to date to today's requirements, because after all, we all realize that our syllabi are focused still on a lot of information which by the press of a button all children can access quite easily, and we have to focus more on skills, social skills, on mental health, because mental health issues will be greater, I suppose, and that really is of concern to us.
Thank you very much. Very interesting topics that you have touched upon, and I hope now that during this webinar we will continue touching upon them. So perhaps first we can have Glorian's point of view prior to now discussing then the mental health of both the parents and the children. So Glorian, please, can you provide us with your views on the flexibility part of working parents?
Good afternoon. Three speakers before me illustrated very well the experience of parents during the pandemic. And I believe that the idea of this seminar is actually to move to look ahead. And I question, what did we learn from this whole situation? Was when the situation and all the restrictions were being uplifted, and all of a sudden parents were asked to go back to their work. As an association, we had several parents contacting us and asking us what they are going to do with their children. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, there were no guidelines to parents or to the employers how they could accommodate parents who were previously teleworking, who were in the previous week teleworking. So within a week, parents who were supporting their children in homeschooling and somehow juggling their time to see to their commitments, to their work commitments, had to find alternatives to see how they would accommodate their own children who are still getting online lessons. So the young ones, obviously, there is in how independent the children are according to, but usually as a community, we get the support of grandparents, but these grandparents are considered vulnerable. So we had parents who were concerned about their children who were still progressing with their homeschooling, and their own parents who could not support their children, not knowing what to do. And there were no guidelines. These parents were expected to go back to office. And they were promised that within a couple of weeks there will be Club 3 to 16 or Skola Saif. Fair enough. But the protocol, the health protocols about Club 3 to 16 and Skola Saif were issued only very few days before the actual provision of the service. So parents were concerned also about the safety of their children when these will be at Skola Saif. So here is, let's talk about the role that our employees have as parents. It seems that looking ahead, irrespective of the COVID situation and if there will be a second wave, I question, how are employers considering their employees in their role as parents? Very often the debate between the parent-school relationship is stuck to the school and the parents. And we don't see the bigger picture that the parents very often cannot contribute much to the education of their children because of their working conditions. And sometimes, unfortunately, these are labeled as disinterested in the education of their children, which might not be the case. It's the working condition which is limiting their their contribution of their children. So I would say that at this stage, if we have to see what we have learned from the past experience of the past few weeks, what I have learned is that there is little consideration of the role of the employee in his role or her role as a parent. Way forward, how are we going to see the bigger picture of that parent of a child attending compulsory schooling within the broader picture of that parent as an employee? So it depends very much on the disposition of the employer. We cannot say that there should be general guidelines on having parents working from home. As mentioned already, there are different working conditions, different working commitments. But where is the of the employer? Where is the of the employer? We know of situations where when employees punch for their work, they are asked to leave their mobile phones in their lockers. When schools call the parents to let them know that their children are not well, they cannot reach the parents. So let's broaden up the discussion and see the parent not only as within the relationship between the school and the parent, but within the broader community of the family, within the even broader element of the working conditions. What is the disposition of the employer in the first place? Let's not forget also that the education and the employment are within the same ministry. So what is our next? Consider the employee in his role, her role as a parent of children attending compulsory school. Basically, as I see it, is that the parent is stuck between two very rigid systems, and they have to juggle between two very rigid systems. Where are we going to support this parent for the well-being of the parent himself, herself, for the well-being of the child and of the community, and the community meaning society at large?
Thank you very much. Very, very valid points. And perhaps now I can open the floor to the other panelists so that perhaps they can also contribute their views with what you were saying, Gloriane. So maybe I can direct to Stefania, please.
Thank you. Very interesting points. I'd like to pick up on Gloriane's last perspective of society at large. If we had to take a step, I mean, here I can wear my parent hat, and a parent very much concerned and aware that if I am not present at my children's school activities and interacting with the school, I might be interpreted as being uninterested, which I definitely am, but also as an employer myself. And I think it is important to develop your point further, Gloriane, that both working parents and children are participants within a society, within, I must say, an economy, which is the responsibility of the nation, of the state, of the government. So the government encourages through several initiatives the working parent. We've seen the free childcare, we've seen Club 316. So there have been initiatives. However, this family-friendly work-life balance, work-life-school balance is another important aspect which government ought to look into, because as an employer, I am particularly flexible, because obviously I have my own experience and I understand, and I've been lucky to have had flexible employers myself who enabled me to balance. But there is a limit. As an employer, there is a limit. I have 100 employees. How much flexibility can I give each and every one of them? Imagine if every one of them had a child and they each have 2 parents' meetings a year. That means 200 days of work foregone. So people need to take leave. But then I know that people need leave to rest, not to go to parents' meeting. So the employers can be very flexible and can be very willing, obviously depending on their individual personality and depending on the service which they offer. I mean, within an office, you can go without a person for a day, but if you're providing an essential service, Richmond runs residential services. I can't have people not being there, so they need to be replaced. So that is also a cost on the employer. So it's very telling that Glorian widened this conversation to society at large, and government needs to have a very active role in this, as it has already started to have through other initiatives in the past.
Thank you very much. Perhaps Marco, can we have your views on this as well?
Yes, thanks. Just to add something to what is being said. As you remember, and this is irrespective of COVID or the pandemic or everything, one of the electoral promises that we have, and still not being implemented, that parents can actually use. So there was the promise regarding sick leave being taken due to sick children. The promise, which obviously is now part of the manifesto of the government, was that the sick leave can be used actually to obviously in situations where there are sick children. And this, as you know, it has not yet been implemented by the government. We know that there is increasing resistance from employers to implement this measure, but beyond COVID, I think that this is another aspect which needs to be pushed and needs to be introduced. So at least one of the benefits that is a promise of the current government is at least introduced as well.
Thank you very much. As a mother of 3 little children, I can tell you that would have been very useful, since every one of them is sick very often. If I can perhaps now gather the points that we have touched upon and not yet have discussed. Stefania mentioned the guilt feeling of working parents and also the screen time, because we know that screen time, for example, for children under 2 should actually be 0. And up to 13 years old, children should only have screen time of 2 hours a day, which sometimes may possibly be very unrealistic in the cases of parents. We have also touched upon the aspect of homeschooling, how was that from the working parents' point of view, and also we have touched upon on the mental health point of view, both from the parents and also from the children's point of view. So perhaps, Glorian, can we have your feedback on these topics?
Considering as an association, we threw some suggestions to the Ministry for Education with regards to the homeschooling situation during the COVID-19 period. As an association, we did not believe that children should have the same scheme, the same timetable that they used to follow at school directly online because of the screen time. Being aware also that our parents, some of the teachers are and knowing that they have children themselves. So having the screen time lessons, online lessons directly at the same slot that they used to have at school would have hindered their commitment as parents with their own children. So our position as an association was that there would be some form of personal communication with the teachers, even because the teachers are the significant others of the children, but not necessarily every day 8 to 2, but spread out throughout the week. We did this intentionally to respect the teacher in their role, the teachers in their role as parents, and even to avoid the element of obviously it's very difficult for the parents, as already mentioned, to juggle between their commitments as working parents and support their children homeschooling. our thoughts were also for those parents who were frontliners, who could not actually be at home to support their children. In a survey that we have done as an association related to the parents' experience during the COVID period, one of the points mentioned by the parents was going back to the old normal, and this has a lot of implications. So, and it needs redefining why parents do not want to go back to the old normal. And this links to the previous discourse related to the role of parents and the possibility of teleworking. I agree with Mark, personal communication and personal contact, even with colleagues, is important. So the idea of having 5 days a week teleworking, I don't think it is healthy even for the work and environment and the group dynamics. But allowing some flexibility about this would support the parents in their commitments. Going back also to what Stefania was saying, regarding flexibility and Parents' Day and meaning 200 days of leave, with my understanding of flexibility, it doesn't mean that you do not do the works that you are assigned, but you have the flexibility to do it rather than just a clarification.
Thank you very much. Perhaps now we can pass on to Pauline and have your views on these matters.
Two important points. First of all, if we're talking about the way forward, are we envisaging that there'll be a lockdown? Because the situation in lockdown is different from a normal situation where you have schools which are open, when you have shops opening, when you have all the activities, the normal activities before, as there were before COVID, and the extremely hectic life for parents to taxi their children here and there for PE, for ballet, for piano, for sports and everything. Are we envisaging that kind of scenario and teleworking? Because that would prove something a bit daunting, a bit more complicated rather, as we would have to change our frame of mind on what really matters and how are we now going to do it in a different way. During COVID, children suffered more. I'm saying suffered because they did suffer. We have an obesity problem, and we know that children need at least an hour of physical activity every day. Our children locked at home didn't have that possibility of indulging in play and also in physical activity. I separate these two, play and physical activity, because during play, children learn a lot of social interaction and a lot of social education. There's a lot of social education going on. The peers, leaders, give and take and whatever. And it starts from a very, very young age. And that is why we are against the isolation of children in the home. We are now in a situation where we have children because of the long hours of the period of isolation and such, I call it a hype sometimes because it was a bit overdone. Looking at the physical effect of COVID only has then brought about other problems. Children are now, some children are afraid of going out, and we still have these children who are stuck at home. Now they spend more and more hours on social media, on gadgets, on everything. And also, it was mentioned that, yes, Facebook, for example, you have to be 13. We know of children who are 8, who are younger. And during COVID, many teachers were unaware that the age for having their Facebook account is 13, and they were giving lessons on using that app, that platform, to continue children's education. Also, children felt it a bit more problematic when they were using these apps, and with their parents hovering in the background, they felt that their privacy, and even when talking with peers and their teacher, they just couldn't be themselves, completely themselves, because there was a parent listening and the parent in view of what is going on. And I think that was difficult for the teachers themselves, for the children, and also for the parents, because some parents feel they're not up to scratch to new methods or pedagogical methods. They're now teachers are using. So I think the way forward has to be really done slowly. So working not all the week, definitely. All of us want to even have social interaction at the workplace, and we want that. We want to sort out, because it's different than just communicating like we are doing here on online. It's not every day that we do these webinars with the same people, but interaction, office interaction every day is a difference, and it works, and it affects the mental and psychological well-being of the individual. Remember that some people live alone, some people don't have a network of colleagues, of human beings they can communicate directly with in a large community when they go back home. So post-COVID, the way forward would have to be treated in a more holistic way.
Thank you very much. Marco, perhaps your views on the matter?
Yes, I would like to make a reference to Pauline's three scenarios. Basically, there are three scenarios, as many most probably know. There's the scenario where schools open normally without any restrictions, basically at most for using sanitizing and other measures, but that is the best scenario. So the best scenario would be that schools open normally in September. There are some mitigating measures over there, because mainly there are syllabi which need to be adapted, the curriculum, obviously some transitions, some work regarding transitions, but that is the best scenario. The second scenario, not necessarily in this order, is the scenario of having restrictions in place. So basically having, for example, reduced number of students in class, having perhaps days where students do not attend school. That is another scenario which is possible, and this is a scenario which is used in a number of schools abroad, in Europe mainly. The third scenario is the scenario of having schools closed. Basically, it would be similar to the current situation where we have the pandemic. And just a factor that I need to introduce at this point, and it is worth mentioning, is that if schools at any point will have restrictions or they are closed during the next scholastic year, the situation will still be different from the situation which we faced in the past weeks, because teachers knew their students. So remember that we had passed more than half of the scholastic year. So teachers were basically engaged with their students. They knew them inside out. Having schools not opened in September, or at least they closed within few days or weeks, would pose an added difficulty of having teachers or educators in general.
Thank you very much. Perhaps
not knowing their students, and that is another difficulty.
Thank you very much. Perhaps Stefania, your concluding comments.
We have been discussing the responsibility of the employer and how they can support their employees in this ever eluding balance. I think we should also focus on the responsibility of the employer towards the care of the employees. Of the cause of body, children, employees, employers included. And I think if we want to benefit from the whole situation going forward, we need to take, even as employers, the responsibility to support our employees' mental health for their own benefit, their families' benefit, their children's benefit, but also for the business benefit. Because in the long run, if we have healthy parents, healthy employees, we will have children and a healthy society. There are many ways where employers can obtain mental health services for their employees, and Richmond is definitely one of them. We'd be happy to explore how we can help each individual organization according to their need.
Thank you very much. Before rounding up the session, I would like to read the comments that we have received perhaps in the chat. So in fact, an individual told us that they agreed that children have suffered and parents have likewise suffered. We finished working every day at midnight to be able to take care of the children. However, there is still the fear of the virus, especially for vulnerable family members. Another person told us that the childcare guidelines were issued one day before the official start of childcare. In the meantime, parents were asked to confirm their children's attendance without knowing how the childcare will work. Once the guidelines were issued, childcare centres had to reduce the number of children, and parents were forced to decide whether to take the children to childcare or else risk losing the child's place in the childcare. Very true and very fair comments. Another person told us that I think that when an employer is flexible towards the employee is more loyal towards the firm and will be more productive at his place of work. So even though the employer may lose a few hours of work, I think having flexibility at the place of work will be more beneficial to both the employer and the employee at the end. So now perhaps we can close off the session, and I'll ask all the panelists to summarize in a minute their take-home points. Perhaps we can start with you, Marco.
Yes, thanks. So basically, I think that the situation is this. We passed through the past weeks during the pandemic where it was a learning curve, and we obviously experienced it differently, both with regards to educators who are also parents as well, and obviously parents who are working in various sectors. And the approach is different, and solutions need to be holistic. So when we look at the situation and the way it may evolve in the coming weeks, we need to consider all aspects of it. So we need to consider both working parents and the effect on them. Particularly, I want to emphasize that we need to consider whether situations where there is no flexibility at all. So unless we address that situation where there is no flexibility and no arrangements, we cannot really meet the needs of parents, because we cannot assume that everyone has flexible arrangement. Most probably don't have such arrangements. With regards to mental health, and I want to emphasize this as well. Yes, mental health was affected. So it affected parents, it affected educators, it affected children. And one of the first things that we mentioned, we were meeting the Prime Minister at Castile when schools were closing. We said that the country needs to go into the mental health aspect of the whole population, which is an essential aspect. So the health is important and all other measures, but mental health is an essential factor. And I think that it needs to be emphasized that even during this period where schools are closed and we are relaxing more the measures, mental health still is a persistent issue.
Thank you very much. Stefania, can I have your concluding comments, please?
I think in all of this, we need to look at what is the most important in the long term. a few hours of work will come and go. A few hours of schooling will come and go, and I'm sure the students will be able to catch. And as Pauline said, so much is now accessible to them that they don't need to learn so much content. I think the real valuable thing, is everyone, and I strongly believe that all our discussions, all our policy proposals and initiatives as a society in general, all with each our different hats, should depart from the good mental health. Because if we still enjoy good mental health, or if our mental health has suffered, if we manage to recover that well enough, we can find ways of moving forward for a focus on preserving mental health as we discuss and decide on the way forward.
Thank you very much. Glorian, your concluding comments, please.
I think that the best way forward, to complement what the other speakers have said, is to see the individual within the context, but to consider this context at different scale. The scale only as a parent, we cannot only as an employee, but consider the context zooming out as the individual in his role as a parent, as an employee, as a son and daughter of elderly people. So addressing the mental health of these people would obviously have ripple effects on the community around them. As I said, at different scales. The community can be the family, it could be the larger community, and hopefully it ripples off to the larger society. But we cannot consider the individual only as the employee, only as the parent. The individual has different facets, and that have to be taken care of.
Thank you very much. Pauline, your concluding comments, please.
Well, this pandemic has taught us to reflect more on the way we were doing things, the way we look at work, employers look at us, and the way we carry out our education processes, and poverty as well. I think two things that we haven't mentioned is that a number of children were completely left out of schooling for various reasons. There were other parents who've lost their jobs and so faced financial difficulties and financial stress at home, and that also affected children. We have to think in a holistic way, as we've all been saying, about the needs. All the members of the family have their own separate needs. Employers also have to have their own needs to keep the economy going. Teachers have their own needs, but we also have to look at the social and emotional aspect and the psychological impact of everybody cooped up at home, doing work, doing schooling, doing social activity together there in a confined space. The repercussions can be very heartbreaking for everyone, distressful to say the least.
I hope that everyone has enjoyed this webinar today, and I thank the panelists for joining us for today's webinar as well. I hope that now, going forward, the employers will have more flexible working arrangements for their employees, and also that the mental health issue will also be addressed, both for parents and also both for the children. We look forward for you joining us for tomorrow's session, which will be held one at 11 o'clock and another one at 12 o'clock. Thank you very much and have a nice day.